Poverty's traumatizing. Like, I've been struggling. Welcome to the struggle bus. Population me. I work in public health, and I work with individuals who live in poverty. It is what it is. I actually love my job. Love it. Would do it for free if I could afford to. I'm middle-class cheap girl here. You see my posts about middle-class cheap girl outfit of the day. I didn't grow up middle class. I didn't grow up middle class at all. And I'm not talking working class, middle class, broke. I grew up poor. Like, poor. Poverty is horrible. It's horrible. It is a horrible place to be. There was a period with my parents where we were homeless. We lived in a tent. We stayed in a crappy hotel. We sofa surfed. I was probably about 15 at the time. You know, the panic of when the car starts making a noise. How are you going to fix it? You know, how is mom going to get to work if the car breaks down? Because even though we don't have much, we will lose everything if mom can't get to work. You know, brother is sick. Mom has to go to work. She doesn't get sick time, so guess who's staying home from school with sick little brother? You know, and it's never ending. It's like there's no escape. You know, you'll take 2 steps forward just to have 3 things hit you in the face. You know, you'll save a little bit of money to have whatever breaks cost 4 times of the amount of money you were able to save. And you have nothing. You have nothing. You have shoes falling off your feet. You live in Narnia up here, and it's freaking cold, and you don't have a warm coat, and your fingers turn freaking blue when you go out and wait for the school bus. And then you go to school, and the kids make fun of you because you smell bad, because you don't have running water, and you're hungry because there's no food at home. And you're worried about your brother who is at home because he's not school-aged yet. And you worry about your mom because your mom's with an individual who's mean to her. And you worry about when you get home, are you going to have to listen to your stepdad talk to you about how stupid and lazy and no good, worthless you are, while your brother's running around naked, eating a can of cream style corn because it's the only thing that was in the house, and the heat isn't working in the house because nobody got the fire going, and all the firewood is still outside soaking freaking wet. So when you do climb it in with your no gloves and your no boots and your shoes that are falling off and your coat that isn't warm enough, you can't get the freaking fire started because the wood's still freaking wet. So you have an electric stove that you turn it on to heat with, and it doesn't really warm things. Then you finally, at the end of the day, climb into bed, and you feel something weird under you, and you look down, and there's a freaking mouse in the bed, because the mouse is just trying to stay warm too, so it climbed under the covers. And it's every day. Every day. There's no end. It's over and over and over, and there's no end. And it's like you're on a hamster, just running on a freaking hamster wheel, and there's never going to be anything different, and there's never going to be any change. And that is poverty. That's poverty. And I'm very thankful to be a broke middle class girl right now. You know, the groceries are pissing me off, but we have food in our belly. Tonight, made a zucchini chicken mushroom dish over rice, homemade Chinese food. I'm sad because I'm craving, like, takeout Chinese food. But we have money to make homemade Chinese food and skills to make homemade Chinese food. But just being in that conference just rips off the scab that is still there of poverty. The traumatizing scab of poverty. And I know most of the people I grew up with are still there. So I feel guilty, too, for leaving poverty. I feel so blessed that I had the chance to go to college and marry somebody who took care of us, who was a partner in life. But so many people I went to high school with never left it. So I'm struggling right now with guilt and sadness and panic and anxiety from American poverty.
Guys, would you believe me if I told you that poverty is more expensive than we think? It is true. Poverty is way, way expensive than what people may think. People might think that living in poverty is cheap, but no, it is very, very expensive, particularly if you are coming from a country like the United States of America, right? So poverty in the USA is often misunderstood. Many imagine poverty as simply the lack of money, a matter of not earning enough to cover basic needs like food, shelter, and clothing. But what is the true meaning on the surface? Poverty in the US is far more complex and costly than what most people realize. Poverty in the US is not just about low wages or unemployment. It is about a system that makes being poor itself expensive. In other words, in America, it costs more to be a poor person, right? So, there is a group of white Americans who've come up front and they're discussing the hard life, right? They're discussing how poverty is really, really making them want to give up in life. And this is mostly after they voted in Trump, right? So I want us to dive into this video, listen to them speak. I shall get back by the end of the video, of course, where we shall also have a deep, critical analysis. Let's dive in.
One of the things that the upper middle class and the wealthy don't understand is how expensive it is to be poor. And this is one of those things that causes the biggest disconnect between the two classes. So to me, this is one of the most important videos that I've made so far. And I hope I can shed some light on it so that people in that upper middle class and above range can understand what low-income people go through on a daily basis just to live. I want to break it down in sections so that I can show those hidden costs that the upper middle class take for granted because they don't have to deal with them. First, let's take a look at housing. So if you drive by a neighborhood that's obviously low income and you see all the houses and they're all in disrepair, they're all in bad shape, you can see, the windows are old, the siding's old and everything, and you probably think to yourself, wow, that rent's got to be super cheap, for the people that are living there. And you would be right. Or if you drive by a trailer court, you would probably say the same thing, that the rent's obviously got to be extremely cheap and for those people that are living in there. And again, well, not so much anymore, but in the past, you would be correct that the rent was a lot cheaper. But here's the hidden cost for the low income people that is never talked about and is never really thought about. See, when I lived in a trailer, I lived in a 14 by 72, really small. Those things are put together like shit. And so all of these low-income homes, whether you're talking about a house or you're talking about a trailer, they're not insulated right. Nothing's been maintained. There's leaks everywhere. The windows haven't been updated. The trailers, they only have like a metal shell and really thin insulation, they're framed together by 1x3s. So they're garbage. So yeah, the rent was cheap. When I owned mine, it was $525 a month for lot rent, but I lived in a very cold state. But when the winter would come, it was not uncommon to see electric bills, heating bills at $550 a month, which is insane. So you would go from the summer, which would be okay. Your utility costs would be a lot lower, 200 range, because you constantly have to run that damn swamp cooler because those things get hot because they're made out of metal. But in the fall and in the winter and in the beginning part of spring, because it's so cold outside and the heat running and it's just escaping through that thin insulation and through that metal, nothing's holding that heat in. Your utilities would run anywhere from $550, $575 a month. So there's one of the costs. So it's really not that cheap. So when you add that together, you're paying $1,100 a month for a piece of garbage. And you have to remember that this is low income people, so the disposable income is a lot lower already to begin with. Now let's take a look at some other simple things, such as clothing. So lower income people can never justify the expense when they need to go buy a new pair of shoes to pay, $80, $90, $100 for a good pair of shoes. And the same thing with jeans and shirts and winter jackets, things like that. Normally they don't have the money in their bank account to afford those expensive items anyway, but they can't justify the cost because they're always living paycheck to paycheck. And so what do? Well, the lower income person buys $25 pairs of sneakers, $30 pairs of sneakers, whatever they can afford. Same thing with the jeans, $10 at the fucking Walmart or whatever, But what happens? Here's where it gets expensive. Those shoes don't last. They wear them to work. They wear those jeans to work, their winter jacket to work. They're made cheaply, so they just start friggin' falling apart after 60 days. So they end up having to buy the same damn pair of shoes 4, 5, 6 times a fucking year. So it gets more expensive. These are the costs that are hidden from public view most of the time for the low income people of this country. Now let's look at like cell phones. Just to have a basic cell phone, a lot of low income people have terrible credit and they don't have a lot of income. So it's riskier for these people. It was not unheard of for people going to get cell phones who were low income. They would have to come up with a $200 or $250 deposit just to get a cell phone. When you look at like going to purchase a car, just a used secondhand car, because everybody needs a vehicle to get to work, they would get terrible, terrible rates. These buy here, pay here places that sell vehicles. You would have a horrible interest rate, 35, 40%, anywhere from 25 to 40%. It's just ridiculous. So there's hidden costs there just because they're poor. Not to mention, even some banks charge poor people fees. Because if you don't have a certain amount of money in your checking or savings account each month, they charge a fee for that. You have to have a limit. One of the worst things that I've seen recently, and it's not a new thing, it's been around for quite a while, but look at these corporations and all of their predatory tactics against poor people. Payday loans, all of this kind of horse shit with interest rates that are astronomical. But you know what? The poor person needs them. Christmas comes around, they have no gifts, so they take out a payday loan and think that that's going to help them through. Or their massive utility bill comes through in the winter and they try to take out a payday loan to hold them over. Or title loans on their damn vehicles. It's so predatory and the interest rates are insane. And so they make these monthly payments or these bi-weekly payments or however they're set up for them. And it's a constant drain, so they get further and further behind. And the squeeze gets tighter and tighter. But it's done by design. When you turn on the TV anymore, look at all these ads that you see for all of these apps that you can download. Oh, you need your money now? Don't wait till payday, get your money now. It's just another way to funnel money away from people who are already in the low income bracket, who are already suffering. These are all these hidden costs that most people sweep under the rug, don't even think about. Most low income people, when it comes to even the food that they consume, most of them can't go out and buy all of the healthy food all at once. Right? So it's cheaper to go to a McDonald's to get a meal for $10 because to make that same meal at home, you would have to invest up front, $25. Yeah, it's cheaper in the long run if you can buy bulk and all of that, but most of the low income people can't buy all of the bulk to keep making meals at home to hold them over. They can only afford what's left in their bank account. Not to mention most of the poor people. They can't afford insurance. They don't have medical coverage. So instead of having the doctor that they see on a regular basis, what do? They wait. They don't have any preventive medicine care. They wait. They wait until they get sick. And where the hell do they go? Well, they can't go to a doctor's office because that costs money. So they go to the emergency room. And we all know how much more expensive the emergency room is compared to having a regular doctor. And so they rack up all this medical debt. And it just keeps getting piled on and piled on and piled on. So my goal in this video, I hope, was to be informative, to inform people of all of these hidden costs and to think about these things in a different light. Because being poor in America is expensive as hell. And it just keeps getting worse. All right, guys, this is Grim with Get to Rant, and I'll see you in the next video.
Welcome to episode 30 of Being Broke is Expensive, where I look at the true costs of poverty and examine the very expensive choices that people have to make when they live paycheck to paycheck at or below the poverty line. Today, our random city generator chose New Orleans, Louisiana. In 2023, the median household income in New Orleans was about $58,800 per year. Adjusted for inflation in 2025, this is about $62,100 per year. Also, if this is your first time coming across one of these videos, I use MIT's Living Wage Calculator as a data source and for expense categories. They're listed right here. If you want to learn more, just Google MIT's Living Wage Calculator. I also use a random number generator to pick a household composition, so today we got number 7. That means we have 2 adults with 1 working and 2 children. I'm also assuming that this household already has existing debt of $25,000 for student loans and $5,000 for credit cards. Here are the interest rates right here and the amortization terms, which comes to a total monthly debt service payment of about $250 a month. In 2025 in New Orleans, Louisiana, for a household of 4 with 2 adults, 1 of them working, and 2 children, a living wage is considered to be about $86,200 a year. But the median household income is only $62,100 a year. That means this household's in a deficit. If we assume that this household's actual expenses are the living wage level of expenses, then this household's in a deficit of about $21,771 a year, or about $1,814 per month. So that means this family has 3 options. They can either A, find another source of income, B, cut expenses, or C, go further into debt. And we'll look at each of those 3 options in detail. The first option is to find another source of income. To break even, meaning the living wage level of expenses are met, this household has to find a full-time job paying about $10.50 an hour, a 24-hour-a-week job paying about $17.50 an hour, or a 16-hour-a-week job paying about $26 per hour. However, if they want to save 15% of their income per year, that full-time job has to pay about $14.50 an hour, the 24-hour-a-week job has to pay about $24 an hour, and the 16-hour-a-week job has to pay just over $36 an hour. However, this comes with 4 different opportunity costs. The first opportunity cost is time. Let's say that this household finds another part-time job at 24 hours a week. That means they would have to spend another 1,248 hours per year working, as opposed to doing something otherwise that's productive with their time. The second opportunity cost is lost potential wealth. Let's say that this family took that 15% savings from that second job and used it to pay off something like credit card debt or to build up an emergency fund for savings, instead of investing it. If they invested it instead, they would have had almost $940,000 in wealth over a 30-year period and about $120,000 in lost potential wealth over a 10-year period. This assumes an 8% annual rate of return. The third and fourth opportunity costs are delayed homeownership and delayed retirement. Let's say that our family was trying to save for a 15% down payment for a $300,000 house in New Orleans. This would take them just under 5.5 years. For a family with a living wage, this would take them less than 4 years. As far as retirement's concerned, let's say that each of these families needs about $1.5 million to retire. Our family would have to wait till they're 67 years old. A family with a living wage could retire at 62. Additionally, keep in mind, this includes the fact that our family has to keep that second job saving 15% of their income per year for the next 37 years just to stay on this retirement pace. Okay, what about expenses? What does that situation look like? As far as expenses are concerned, the column on the left represents the living wage level of expenses, and the column on the right represents the maximum this family can afford based on their $62,000 a year salary. So right now they're running in a deficit of about $1,800 per month. However, if we assume that their actual expenses is the data on the right instead of the living wage level of expenses, then they'd be saving a little bit of money each month on food, maybe a little bit of money each month on housing, transportation, and other categories as well. But even with all of these expense cuts, they would still be in the hole about $930 a month, and they would have to cut expenses by about another 16.7% on average to break even. Okay, what about debt? What does that situation look like? In order to attain a standard of living that meets the living wage level of expenses, this family needs to borrow about $1,814 per month. Now, let's say that they do that for a 1-month period. They would now be in almost $32,000 in debt, because this also includes the $25,000 in student loans they have, as well as the $5,000 in credit card debt. Now, the maximum that they can pay towards servicing all of that debt is about $690 a month, which is all of their savings from that second job. Now, this would take them more than 33 years to pay off all of that debt. And here's each of those choices graphically represented. So up here, this is the wealth built over time using that second job. The green line represents a family with a living wage, and the orange line represents our family. Down here are expenses, so the blue bars represent the living wage level of expenses. The orange bars represent the maximum this family can afford, and the red represents the deficit they're in each month. And then down here is the debt. So the blue line represents the debt balance over time, and the orange line represents the cumulative interest paid over time. And they have so much debt that it actually doesn't even converge and goes off the chart. New Orleans was definitely an interesting case to run because I wasn't expecting the median household income to be so low, and the cost of living is quite significantly higher than what the median household income is. So this family is actually in a lot of trouble. The most immediate and glaring thing is the amount of debt that this family is in. They're going to be in debt for the next 3 decades to pay off that credit card and student loans. And if they borrow any additional money, they'll probably be in debt in perpetuity, which is definitely a scary situation to be in. The first thing this family needs to do is one of those parents needs to secure part-time work, preferably on nights and weekends, such that they can avoid childcare expenses while also at the same time building up some bit of emergency savings while also taking some of that debt down. As far as expenses are concerned, honestly, I don't think there's a whole lot more this family can do. I cut down the housing expenses, I cut down the transportation expenses. You can bring civic engagement to 0, and you can do other things as well, but it's honestly not making that big of a dent. I think this family is living as lean as they can right now. The other thing that this family needs to do is avoid more debt at all costs. If they go so much as, say another $3,000 or $4,000 in debt, that could quite literally add decades to the amount of time that they'd have to spend paying all that debt off. Overall, New Orleans was definitely a very interesting case, but if you guys have a request for another city or another family composition, just let me know an MSA, a family composition, and an income level, and I'll happily run the case for you.
Times 40 is $290.
$290 a week. Who the is living on $290 a week? That's bananas. So yes, you definitely need to bring up that minimum wage to at least a reasonable. The minimum wage has not kept up. Had our Congress raised the federal minimum wage at the same rate that GDP has grown since the 1960s, the minimum wage would be $22 an hour federally. The federal minimum wage would be $22 an hour. Instead, it's $7.25 an hour. $7.25 an hour. That's $290 a week. That's ludicrous. $290 a week? Find me rent for $290 a week. What is that, $1,200 a month? Find any one-bedroom apartment for $1,200 a month, including utilities. You can't do it in virtually any city in America. Then how the hell could that be our minimum wage? That the minimum wage is less than the cost of a one-bedroom apartment.
Listen, let's talk about something today, y'all. Normally I'm on YouTube with my videos, but I've decided to come over to TikTok and share some of my videos over here. So anyway, one thing I want to talk to you guys about today is the fact that there are no jobs in America right now. Like, they're saying that there are all these jobs. Trust me, there are no jobs. Okay? The only people getting hired for jobs are, excuse my French, migrants, aka the illegal kind, and felons, okay? Because they have to hire felons. Like, it's legally, they have to hire felons now. Also, with migrants, it's much cheaper to hire migrants for labor than it is to hire someone like myself. But I've been looking for a job. Many people that I know have been looking for a job. There is a labor shortage. They keep saying that there are all these crazy jobs in America and everybody's doing so well. And like, no. There's not a whole bunch of jobs in America. Why do you think everybody's selling feet pics and doing OnlyFans, okay? I myself even do OF, like, because at this point it's like OnlyFans or be homeless. Like, there's really no other option, especially when you're a single parent, you're a single mom, you got priorities. And when I say single moms, like, I have a kid whose father is not in the picture, so I have to provide all of the needs for my child. And I don't have anybody to watch my kid. I mean, during the day they go to school. Yeah, so I've been trying to look for a job during the day where I could work during the daytime, okay? Because I'm not going to just put my kid off on someone else. You know, if you're not her dad at the end of the day, I'm not going to put her off on you. I'm not going to ask my parents to watch my kid or anything like that. So my kid does go to school during the daytime. Now, when my kid isn't in school, which is from the late afternoon throughout the evening, those are the hours that they want you to work. I've been trying to find a job and I'm telling them I'm available 7 days a week during the day. And I'm still not finding anything. They're looking for somebody who can close, who can work nights, who can be on call, who can work every weekend. And if you have kids at home, it's almost impossible for you to do that unless you have like a full-time nanny or somebody who lives with you who can take care of the kids. Now, I have an older kid, but I'm not the type of mom to push my older kid to watch my kids for me because that makes kids very resentful. And quite frankly, I resent not having a life growing up sometimes because I had to watch my younger siblings a lot. So, therefore, plus I have an older son. Like boys are not, I don't trust boys with babysitting small children. Like that's just irresponsible. They like to do shit and be all over the place. Excuse my language, but they like to be all over the place doing things and playing video games and on their phone and TikToking with their friends and everything else and not paying attention to the kids. So therefore, I've been unable to find a job. Many people that I know, unable to find a job. So it's just very frustrating because especially when you see people who are here that have many people living in their households and who can work any hours of the day and night for less than what they would pay a American citizen. And it's just like very frustrating. Like I'm not mad at the people who own the corporations because they're just trying to get in where they fit in. I heard something, it scared me. But yeah, they're just trying to get in where they fit in. You know, they're trying to save money and make the best of their opportunities. But for the people like me, for the average American citizen who didn't already have a job when this big explosion came, it's like, what are we to do? How are we to feed our families? Like, can you relate or no?
The homeless have no right to turn every park and sidewalk into a place for them to squat and do drugs.
That was Trump 2 years ago in a campaign video addressing homelessness. Today, he put those words to paper, signing an executive order titled Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets. In it, he directs Attorney General Pam Bondi to attempt to end policies that limit local and state governments' abilities to move homeless people into treatment centers, redirects federal funds for transferring the unhoused to rehabilitation and treatment facilities, prohibits convicted sex offenders who receive homelessness assistance from being housed with children, and directs HHS, HUD, and the Department of Transportation to prioritize funding to states and cities that enforce prohibitions on open drug use, urban camping and loitering, and urban squatting, and track the location of sex offenders. Governor Newsom's office responded to the order in a statement, saying in part, like so many of Trump's executive orders, this order is more focused on creating distracting headlines and settling old scores than producing any positive impact. The National Homelessness Law Center echoing the sentiment, saying the misguided order deprives people of their basic rights and makes it harder to solve homelessness.
So an American man went to Germany for 3 years and he came back a completely changed man because his eyes were open to the suffering that we as Americans just kind of vibe with over here. He shared on Reddit that he worked in Germany for 3 years before coming back to the US, and he said, honestly, every day I'm here feels like I'm in some dark comedy where people have accepted suffering as normal. Yep, totally cool. He said that in Germany, he got 30 days of paid vacation plus holidays. But here people feel guilty for taking just 1 day off, like rest is some kind of moral failing. There's no federally mandated paid time off here in the land of the free, but in Germany, 20 days off for full-time workers is mandatory, and many companies give more. Hey Americans, enjoy your 2 weeks of PTO if you even get that, suckers. And Christmas? Pfft, the capitalist machine never stops. Not even for Jesus' birthday. What about sick leave? Well, in Germany, if you're sick, you stay home and you still get paid. In the United States, you drag your disease-riddled body to work because you can't afford to miss a day. bills. Yeah, sick leave isn't required by federal law in the US, so thanks for nothing, government. We lose income when we're sick, and we rack up ridiculous medical bills that would make a European faint. Speaking of, don't get this Reddit guy started on healthcare because he says that's the most dystopian part. In Germany, this guy paid a small cut of his income and everything was covered. Everything. All of it. Meanwhile, needing healthcare in the United States can bankrupt you. People in America often don't even go to the doctor because a doctor's visit could run you hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And that's with health insurance. Oh, and rent? Reddit guy said that his apartment in Germany was twice the size and half the price of his US apartment. Love that for us. Tell me again about how it's the greatest country in the world. Oh wait. Reddit guy said it best. Americans deserve so much better. And once you see how other countries treat their workers, you can't unsee it. Americans, we need to keep pushing for more because we don't want to normalize settling for.
I am so tired of feeling helpless as a parent. Yes, my kids are grown adults. My oldest is 28, my youngest is 25. And I thought by teaching them what I learned, which is you work hard, you get a good job, you're going to get the things in life that you need, right? Worked for me, why wouldn't it work for them? Because it doesn't. Because the world has fucking changed, all right? And now I feel like I see them struggling. And before my generation comes at me, yes, I understand struggling is a part of life. We all struggled. But there's a difference between struggling and drowning. All right? So we struggled and it was tough. But you know what? We made it. We knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel with our struggle. It seems like kids today, no matter how much they struggle, they just get further and further down the water into the drowning point. All right? When I was their age, I was making less than $10 an hour. And I can afford to live on my own. Now you have to be making six-figure salary to get a decent, tiny little place to live. So what the fuck is going on and how do we help them as parents? I told my son, all you have to do is work hard, go to college or join the military like I did. He went to college, got his degree, got a full-time job. He moved back in with me right when he graduated from college because he said, hey, Mom, as soon as I get a job, which was within 2 weeks of him getting out of college, maybe take me 2 months and I'll save up enough money for me to move out. Okay, cool. It's been 10 months. He has saved almost every dime and still can't afford to live. Why are one-bedroom studio apartments almost $2,000 a month? Why? Like, I just don't get it. So I don't even think that there's even classes anymore. There used to be, upper class, middle class, lower class. It's literally turning into the ultra wealthy and then everybody else is just poor. Like, that's what is happening. And then I told him, hey, when you turn 25, at least your car insurance will go down. Hell no, he turned 25 and his car insurance went up $150. I tell him, if you need health insurance, get a good job. He has health insurance. He has had a medical emergency this week. Had to go to emergency room twice. He had to go to the emergency room because he couldn't get anybody to see him with the health insurance that he had. Right? So he had to go to an emergency room. Now he's out money for that too. It seems like you can never get ahead. And then my daughter, I told her all you have to do because she wanted to buy her own house. My daughter worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day to save up enough for this down payment. Finally got this house. She's paying double what I'm paying for my mortgage, but her loan was the same amount. And then her mortgage company, after she's already moved in, said, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you that you need this type of coverage, which we forgot in the beginning. That's an extra $200 you've been paying a month. And all they see when they come home is they watch social media, kids their age on lavish vacations with all this money and nothing to do, all these social media influencers, because we value those types of things over hard workers. We will pay them $10,000, but you work 40 hours a week, you can't afford it.
And your calculation of how we could end poverty in this country was how much money?
So if you take everyone below the poverty line and lift them above it, that's about $177 billion a year. And it's a super rough estimate, but it gives us a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about ending poverty, because that's so utterly attainable for us, right? That's less than 1% of our GDP.
Right.
So a study came out that showed that if the top 1% of Americans just paid all the taxes they owed.
Just the ones they owed?
Just the ones they owed, and not got taxed at a higher rate, just paid what they owed, we would net about $175 billion a year. So we could just about close the poverty gap.
Just with and without levying other taxes, just collecting what we need.
Right. I mean, so like...
So,
yeah, right. Yeah.
Because, like, when you say that, I just go, no.
Right.
That can't be.
Right.
But be.
Right.
That's insane.
Okay.
So this guy who wrote a whole entire book about poverty in America crunched the numbers, and he figured out that if corporations, billionaires, if they just paid what they owed. We're not talking about increasing their taxes to, Franklin Delano Roosevelt time when they were charging like 60, 70% in taxes, just what they owed, aka the taxes that they be avoiding with their offshore accounts, with their, fantastical accounting, their accounting gymnastics that they do with their Barbados accounts, Bermudas, their Swiss Alps, the Swiss accounts, right? If they weren't doing all these tax shelters and all that stuff, and they just paid what they owed, we don't even got to increase that shit. Then we would be able to end poverty. We could bring everybody above the poverty line in this country.
This isn't the American dream anymore. It seems like the American struggle. Your grocery bill is the same price as your mortgage payment or your rent payment. Hope's down, rent's up. You can't find a piece of land anymore because people from other countries or big developers are coming in and they're splitting it into eight acre lots and building houses, and then they're charging $500,000 to a middle apiece and then saying that's the American dream. American dream used to be where you could afford things, where you could afford as a family to buy a house, pay for your groceries, get good health care, get child care so that you can work. The American dream used to be about dreams. You could dream of a better life. You could dream of your own 40-acre plot of land with animals and a big garden. It used to be where you could go to your neighbor's house and ask for sugar. I wouldn't knock on my neighbor's door anymore in America because you're liable to get shot. And then they think they're right. And you see that on the news all the time. It happens every single day, it seems like, in America. Living in America now, you're required to almost speak 2 to 3 different languages just to understand everybody in a single day. That's not my American dream. My American dream is about hope. My American dream is about love. My American dream is to be able to raise a family and to put kids in school without having to worry about something terrible can happen to them, or that the teachers don't even speak English in a lot of the schools, and the kids come home and their grades are bad because they can't understand the work the teacher's given. Folks, that's not the American dream. That's the American nightmare. This is Outlaw Unfiltered.
So, I don't normally ever come on here and post anything except of my dog because he's absolutely gorgeous. But, I am extremely frustrated being a full-time employed person living in Florida and not being able to afford to live. I have spent my whole fucking day off trying to find a, more affordable place to live because I can't afford fucking $1,300 a month in rent and then fucking a $650 car note and then $300 in fucking insurance and then you got utilities and it's just it's either I eat or I pay my bills, and then even then it's like, okay, well, which bill's gonna be fucking late this month? And I'm so fucking sick of it. Like, all these fucking apartment complexes and realtors and even private renters, fuck you. Fuck you so fucking hard. And I mean that with everything in me. Fuck you. I, nor anybody else, should be working 60 plus hours a fucking week and not be able to fucking live. I'm about to crash the fuck out. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me losing my fucking mind. I don't know. But I'm about to lose my shit because I just can't take.
So, let's think of poverty as a trap, not a temporary condition, right? So, we are going to analyze this video based on what has been said by the audience. Yeah. So for millions of Americans, poverty is not something they can simply work their way out of. The wages for low-income jobs have remained stagnant for decades, while the costs of housing, healthcare, education, and even basic necessities have risen dramatically. This creates a situation where the poor often spend more in the long run than wealthier individuals, because they cannot afford the upfront costs that bring long-term savings. Poverty becomes a trap that punishes those inside it, keeping them from moving forward, right? A good example is the housing, paying more for less. One of the clearest examples is housing here. A family that cannot afford the down payment for a home or the credit score needed for a mortgage ends up renting. Renting, however, is almost more expensive than owning in the long term. Landlords set high rents, sometimes taking up to 50% or more of a family's income. Low-income renters are often concentrated in neighborhoods with fewer resources, schools, hospitals, grocery stores, which perpetuates cycles of disadvantage. Moreover, poor families cannot afford to move to areas with better opportunities, right? Moving requires upfront money, first month's rent, security deposits, moving trucks. Without this cushion, many remain stuck paying higher rent for substandard housing in unsafe neighborhoods, right? And we're speaking of America, we're not speaking of Africa. In Africa, it's just a whole new story. We have also the rising cost of food, right? The price of eating poor. Eating healthy in America is not cheap. Fresh fruits, vegetables, and organic products cost significantly more than processed food. In food deserts, where grocery stores are scarce, poor families rely on corner shops or fast food chains, which charge more for less nutrition. Over time, this leads to a higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Healthcare expenses that follow are far more costly than the short-term savings of cheap meals. Ironically, being poor forces families into choices that later make them sick, trapping them in medical debt. Poverty is not just about hunger, it is about expensive hunger. We also have the healthcare sector, the debt of survival. Healthcare is perhaps the most punishing cost of being in poverty in the United States of America. Wealthier individuals with employer-provided insurance pay a fraction of what is uninsured or underinsured people pay. A single emergency room can cost thousands of dollars, pushing families into debt. For the poor, small health problems, untreated infections, skipped medication can turn into life-threatening conditions because they could not afford preventive care. In this way, poverty multiplies its own cost. Lack of money leads to lack of care, which leads to worse health, right? Which leads again to more expenses. Survival itself becomes expensive. We also have credit and borrowing, and also the high price of being broke. Another hidden cost of poverty is credit. Poor families often do not have access to traditional banking services. Without savings, they rely on payday loans, rent-to-own schemes, or high-interest credit cards. Pay lenders, for example, charge interest rates that can exceed 300%. What might have been a small financial setback becomes a cycle of debt that takes months, even years, to repay. Wealthier people, by contrast, use low-interest loans, mortgages, and investment tools to grow wealth. For the poor, borrowing is not an opportunity. It is a trap. education also. The expensive ladder out. You see, Nelson Mandela said, education is the key you can use to change the world. But what if education itself, the cost of educating yourself is so high and above the roof? What happens next? You see, education is supposed to be a pathway out of poverty. But in the USA, it often adds to the problem. Public schools in low-income areas are underfunded by the government, which means children receive a weaker start. If they pursue college, they often graduate with overwhelming student debt, which can cripple them for decades. While wealthier families can pay for private schools, tutoring, or debt-free college, poor students pay the highest price for trying to escape poverty, right? And also we have the psychological costs of this poverty problem. Beyond the financial expenses, poverty is mentally and emotionally exhausting. Constant stress about bills, food, housing, or safety creates anxiety and depression. Studies show that the mental strain of poverty reduces people's ability to make long-term plans because survival requires focusing on the present. The psychological burden itself becomes a hidden cost, affecting family stability, child development, and work performance, right? Another one is poverty as a burden on society. It is also important to note that poverty is not only expensive for individuals, it is expensive for the entire country. The government spends billions on emergency health care, welfare programs, housing assistance, and food stamps, much of which could be reduced if structural inequality were addressed. Businesses also lose productivity when employers are sick, stressed, or unable to afford reliable transportation. You see, poverty drains resources that could otherwise strengthen the economy of the country. And why the poverty in the US is so expensive? That's a question you might be asking yourself. You see, the American system is unique in how it penalizes the poor. Unlike many other developed countries, basic needs such as healthcare, housing, and education are not guaranteed rights, but market-based privileges. This means that those with the least resources pay the highest prices for survival. Poverty is not just a lack of income. It is about systemic inequality that transforms poverty into an expensive condition, right? Here we have to conclude now. Poverty in the US is far more expensive than many realize. It costs more to rent than to own, more to eat healthy, more to eat unhealthy than to eat well, more to borrow money when one is broke, and more to stay sick than to get preventive care. For poor Americans, every decision carries an extra financial penalty, making escape from poverty even harder. The reality, or rather the real tragedy, is that poverty is not simply a personal failure, it is a societal design. If the US invested more in affordable housing, universal health care, accessible education, and fair wages, the cost of poverty would drop dramatically, both for individuals and the nation. Until then, poverty will remain not just a state of lack, but a heavy and expensive burden that America's poorest will carry every day. Yes. So that's the end of the critical analysis and the deconstruction. I hope that you've earned, or rather you've gotten some value from this. If you have gotten some value, be sure to subscribe, support me on Patreon, donate something small, the one that God wills you to do. I really, really appreciate for those who have always supported me. I really appreciate for your kindness and support. Yeah. See you in the next one, and let's stay connected. Let's let's pray for one another. Yeah. See you in the next one.